Should be. Let me check the timer. There we are. We're live with Michael Burcin from Underpar Consulting. Michael, it's very fun to have you on. Look forward to learning more about what you do because it's very interesting.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Anxious to talk all things golf. Yeah, it's a great day here in Charleston. Excited.
One question I have to ask you is you were at USC, University of South Carolina, for a number of years, and then based off the timeline that I came up with, you went up to University of Wisconsin. So that's actually going the wrong way. You're going from great weather to the golfing window is about 4 months. What was there? Did you lose a bet, or no disrespect to the people in Wisconsin, because my family's actually mostly from Chicago, but that's an interesting change. Most people go regionally, but you jumped regions and went further north.
Yeah, I was just an assistant golf coach at South Carolina, just trying to make my climb the professional ladder. I think the worst thing you can do when you coach is to kind of create this picture of where you want to be or where you think you're going to be, because that's where you end up not going. So I would agree with you. I just envisioned myself probably getting a head job somewhere in the region. My wife and I had no intentions of really leaving the South, but we had some really good teams and had done some cool things and had a connection, several connections actually, to a job that was open via the commissioner of the Big Ten. Eddie Fogler, who was a former basketball coach at South Carolina at Vanderbilt, had a connection. Ray Tanner, who's now the AD at South Carolina. So, when someone says, "Hey, do you have an interest in a head coaching job in the Big Ten, Power Five school?" I had to listen. Like that's a pretty jump. So we loved it. It was a program up until that point that had never really had a kind of a dedicated golf coach. They had kind of a series of golf instructors, but as you can see, they're pretty much good in everything. They're one of the premier departments. So we loved it. We'll get into it later, but no pandemic, we'd still be there. I had no intention of getting out of coaching, but just the pandemic kind of opened my eyes to family life. But yeah, it was awesome. It was an unbelievable place to work. Being able to talk to Barry Alvarez and things like that. It was outstanding department. I don't have one complaint about working at that university.
That's interesting because Conrad Ray, the coach of Stanford, Conrad lived here in Hilton Head for somewhere around 10 to 15 years, and we're close enough to the same age that we played a fair amount of golf together, and I would consider Conrad a good friend. And he was one of the first guests that I had on the podcast, and I reached out to him and said, "Conrad, I have no idea what I'm doing. I know you're probably in very high demand, but can you help me out and come on the show?"
Yeah.
I might butcher it, but at least I'll get a chance to practice. Yeah. But and one of the things that we discussed was his ability to talk to other coaches and professors, and when you're at a university, the amount of resources that you have as far as dealing with certain things that, like you said, an instructor that's a coach normally wouldn't think to do. Because they're usually more focused on they need to figure out and solve the puzzle. When you have this enormous ability to reach out to a number of experts in any given field. And I mean, Conrad obviously has a lot there with the alumni there at Stanford and the professors, and being a Big Five conference, the Big Ten, I'm sure you did as well, as you mentioned, Barry Alvarez. Did you utilize that often? Like when you got stuck or didn't know exactly what to do, it's like, well, let me bounce this off of so and so because I think that they had something similar in their department.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, Coach was great. Coach Alvarez. He told us, anybody when he hired you as a head coach, he's like, "I want you to coach and recruit, and we'll take care of everything." So I did not have to fundraise a penny, and his door was always open. I think people that kind of see him from afar see him as maybe an intimidating personality, looks super serious, but he was awesome. He stopped in the office, and I always, there was always an open door there to talk to him about whatever was on my mind. He was super honest. He was very supportive. kind of strip away the professional side, I grew up a huge sports fan as a kid, and my dad coached, and um, still to this day, I pinch myself that I got to spend time with Barry Alvarez. I mean, I knew who he was when I was 10 years old watching him compete. So, um, same thing when I was in South Carolina to sit in meetings with Steve Spurrier. Um, that's crazy to me when I really kind of sit down and just think about some of the things I was able to do. Um, when you're a kid, you just look at those folks from afar, and to be able to just be in the same room, even if you're not involved in the conversation, listen to them talk.
Spurrier's a hell of a golfer. Did you get to play it at all with him? Spend
Yeah, a few
4 hours?
holes here and there. He was always around. He was always at the facility. Um, but yeah, he's a good player and super competitive, and he always wanted to play with our guys. But yeah, I mean, Conrad's right. It was it's a unique situation. I spent a lot of time with Andy North when I was in Wisconsin. He was always around, always practicing in our facility. So again, looking back as a kid, if you would have said, "Hey, you're going to get to spend time with Andy North, Barry Alvarez," I mean, that's crazy, right? I'm sure Conrad did
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
about the people that he.
The as far as what you do, UPC, under par consulting. So I'm sure families who are very uh, involved in their child's golf development, maybe they specialize a little too soon, but they're totally committed. I'm sure that they have a very good idea of who you are and what you do. But for some of the people who would need you equally, if not more, because they're not familiar with the college recruiting process, maybe they, as parents, when they grew up, did not play golf, but their child has, or their children are, and they're showing some promise, and they're showing a great interest in getting to the next level, playing collegiately. Um, can you just explain a little bit on what it is that you do now?
Yeah, yeah. So decided to get out of coaching. Just we wanted to spend more time together. The 130 days on here on the road was uh, kind of smacked me in the face when I was on COVID. Uh, didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to stay in golf. So, the recruiting side is something that we do, recruiting guidance, helping families. It's just a lot of education. It's not rocket science, but getting families to realize there's over 800 programs. And whether you have a son or a daughter, there's a place for everybody, whether you're shooting 90 or whether you're a top 10 kid in the country. So there's a lot that goes into that as far as engagement, but that's part of it. And then the other side, I call it performance coaching. It's really centers around statistics and course management that I think most college coaches really see that kids aren't exposed to if at all growing up, and that's really the difference at the college level. Everybody swings it fine, everybody hits it okay, but there are a long, long list of kids that swing it really good or hit it really, really solid that just can't break through. Shoot a bunch of 75, just can't get to that next level, and um, I think that's a huge issue in golf instruction is that side of the game is just not taught. So that's kind of the other side of what I.
As I was reviewing your things, it struck me as quite obvious that I had this experience when I was, after my playing career was more or less over, as far as at least playing professionally, traveling. And obviously, I had played golf for quite a long time, and I was giving a lesson to a lady who was more or less a beginner. I would say she was at least a 20 handicap. And we spent about half the day on short game, and a fair portion of that time was on pitch shots. In particular, she was very, very scared when she would have to chip or hit a pitch shot over a bunker or water to a green. So we spent the entire morning, and she got relatively proficient, and she seemed like she had some confidence, and you could see the development. So then in the afternoon, we went out on the golf course, and we're doing somewhat of a playing lesson, and we get to a point on the ninth hole where there's a creek that the creek is probably 3 feet wide, but the gap of it is probably 10. And it's like she froze. And to me, I'm in my own head, I'm thinking, what's the matter with you? You just spent the whole morning and you're good at this. But it smacked me dead in the face that here I am coming from the perspective of a playing career. And it's like not even a thought that this creek or river's in front of me. And she's scared to death of it. And I was like, hey, you dummy. She's at a completely different level. She doesn't understand. She's looking at it from her level. You're looking at it from somebody who's been playing golf for 30 years. So that was a reality check for me as far as coaching and having a better understanding and even some empathy of the people you're working with. Um, and then so with that, in looking at what some of these kids do and the ability where they have swings and they show promise as a kid, but when they get to the collegiate level, they, as you said, they have trouble breaking 75. And once you get to a certain level, it's very hard to explain to a kid. It's more about what's going on internally, any confusion or adaptation to a new environment and this or that. That's why you're not breaking 75, and you maybe have to embrace the obstacle. Meaning, you have to get focused, spend some time on getting used to being in the dorm and taking care of what you need to your academics and your everything else. And the golf will come so long as you have a structured practice or whatever your coach prescribes. But that was an eye opening for me. So I completely understand that where some parents who don't play golf, or even if they do, they don't get it. How do you go about that dynamic of getting them to understand that?
Yeah, so a lot of interesting points you bring up there. I think two things that really I dealt with coaching. One is the idea that sports psychologists can fix everything that's going on, right? I think that's really become a common thought. It's, well, does he or she need a sports psychologist? And I've certainly spent a lot of time with some really talented people, and they're awesome. But I will also tell parents, listen, if they are not going to fix poor decisions on the golf course, and they're not going
Mm-hmm.
to fix how your son or daughter decides to practice. Um, so I caution parents that until we can make better decisions and get ourselves around the golf course better, I don't think that's kind of cart before the horse situation. Um, I think statistics is just so underrated. I'm finding it in golf, it's really underrated. Parents, I think a lot of people, right, walk the cart path and well intentioned, right, are keeping track of fairway, total putt, and things that matter, but they kind of don't matter either. When you really boil into statistics, fairways, as we know, are not a huge um, statistical driver as long as we're not kind of hitting the ball off the planet. Total putts, really a misleading stat if you have a player that hits a lot of greens. Why a lot of the criticism towards Scotty Scheffler right now is kind of misguided. Uh, so getting families to understand those things, because a lot of times those conversations that happen in or the car on the ride home from junior golf tournaments, unfortunately, ends up being, I don't know if criticism is the right word, but kind of second guessing son or daughter about what's going on. And really, if you have some good statistics, some good course management talking points, you know, putting is really influenced by pitching, and pitching is really influenced by when you miss the green, where do you miss? If you're missing on the wrong side, I don't care who you are, Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, you're not going to pitch it very good from short side, and you're not going to putt it very good. So, uh, and then that ties back into your first thought, which was kind of the mental side, right? Um, so yeah, it's really interesting. It was something that I was really passionate about as a college coach. Um, it was something that I really became interested in when I made that move from South Carolina to Wisconsin. We were recruiting a different type of player, maybe a player that wasn't as decorated of a junior as what we were doing at South Carolina. So, um, we've really spent a lot of time on course playing to your strengths. So, yeah, again, I just think it's those themes are so under taught at the junior level. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree that number one I see with juniors is if they have a bad day, they call up their swing coach and say, I need
Yeah,
to fix this shot. And because maybe they missed two or three shots out to the right or they hit a hook or whatever they did. And then if that checks out or the instructor gets through to them and the parents, look, you're going to miss shots. I mean, I think what's the tour leader? What's Scheffler like 13 greens around?
yeah,
Give or take a little bit. So he's missing 5 greens around on average, and that's the best ball striker on the planet. So even the best in the world are gonna miss greens. So you're not gonna hit them. So once they get that to their head, now they go to the sports psychologist, and I'm wholeheartedly agree that. Uh, and not just the kids. I mean, the first year I played professionally was 2001, And I had some friends that had been out there for a number of years, 5, 7, 8 years. And my first year, I was just like a fish out of water. I didn't know what I was doing and where to go, what tour to play, and where to go Monday, and all these things. And I didn't even sniff getting through first stage. But if a friend of mine was in finals, and he asked me if I'd caddy for him because his regular caddy was, I don't know, his wife was pregnant or something like that. Not important. But I remember caddying. I distinctly remember the ninth hole at Bear Lakes, down in Jupiter or West Palm, on the course on the other side of the road, and it was a par 5, and it was an hourglass green on an angle. So front left was closer to you, back right was further away. There was a bunker that wrapped around the front, and then there was a bunker over in the middle, but on the left side. So if you hit it to a front pin and you went long, you're in a bunker. If you're short, you're in a bunker. Well, the pin's in the front, and I'll never forget because the Pro V Star had just come out. This is before the Pro VX, and they just released it at Q School. A lot of guys were using them, and he had two. I can't believe I can remember this. He had 215 downwind, and he was waiting in the fairway. I said, "What are you waiting for?" He said, "I don't know if I should hit a hard 5 and try to get it close, because if I hit a 4, it's going to go to the middle of the green at best." And he'd been playing pro for 12 years. I said, "Well, just hit the 4-iron and choke down on it. If you hit it great, you're going to be middle of the green. If you miss it a little left, you're going to be tap-in eagle." And so he did, and he made birdie. And we're walking off the green. He goes, I got to learn that better. And I'm thinking, I've been playing a year. You've been playing for a dozen. How do you not know this? And the decade system has made that very apparent to a lot of people. I think Scott has done a tremendous job with that system. And there's a number more coming along. And, Scott says that they're in so many division or in so many collegiate programs now that he thinks that the next wave of professional golfers is going to be a whole new level. Do you see that kids are picking that up at a much younger age now? If it's not his system, it's another system. There's so many. I think there's shot pattern, decade, lose stuff with Arcos that the statistics is becoming such an integral part.
Yeah, yeah. I think I think Scott does great stuff. We use their systems for Wisconsin. I think at the end of the day, all of the strategy systems are based on proximity. That's what they're all getting at, is understanding that the average tour shot from 100 yards finishes 17 feet from the flag. That's really how everything is based. It takes kids a while to kind of wrap their brains around that. As we know, watching golf on TV is like the worst way to watch golf for kids, and I think parents too, because it's just the 5 players that they're showing. That's really not the normal tour player. The girl or guy who's finishing 30 to sit to 25 feet all day. The leader in proximity right now on tour is at 34 feet. I just looked the other day. So kids that can understand that, and if you're around good players, I was at Q School a couple months ago, and you spend time with a lot of players that don't really do anything flashy and shoot 3 or 4 under. And they may make one long one, maybe they hit one close, but it's a lot of 2-putt pars, and they hit a few to 10, 12 feet, a couple, but it's not. The days that you shoot 63 you can't predict those days.
No,
you can't make those days happen. So yeah, the statistical stuff I think it's been huge in our game. I think it's come in at a good time too, because I think rangefinders are just the worst thing ever for development. I know why they're there, and they do good things. They are awful kids, and so hopefully some of this statistical stuff that's become popular kind of counterbalances the the hurt that rangefinders does for young freshman players.
Talking to some of the players that I had as juniors, and then they went on to play. They're playing professionally now. That once they found out, as you just said, that the average proximity of the hole on the PGA Tour is over 30 feet, that they're it's like they said they completely relaxed because they were pressing so hard. They always thought that they had to hit it inside of 12 feet on a regular basis to win. I'm like, okay, you might have to win on a more often, but that's to win, and that's not everybody every week. I mean, Tiger was the exception, and even Tiger Woods didn't hit it that close. I mean, I think Lou has posted many times on Tiger's proximity to the hole, which was better than the tour average, but it wasn't what many
No.
people think. Maybe it's 30 feet, goes from 35 feet to 31 feet. But it's, as we all know now, it's more a large number avoidance than it is make more birdies.
Yeah, I mean, the two greatest players of you and I's generation, Tiger and Phil, hit 50% of their fairways. So what does that mean, right? Well, they were really good mentally. They had really good short, but they also hit it to 20 feet a lot. And, I tell kids all the time, who maybe didn't see Tiger in prime, that he was very vocal about his two goals in payday were to lead the tour and greens regulation. And then he didn't want a three putt. Um, so, was he a good putter? Sure. Did he make his share? Sure, he did. Uh, Phil did, right? But those guys did a lot of things really well that weren't super sexy or flashy,
Mm-hmm.
and they get overlooked.
I agree that everyone, they look at the intensity of Tiger and at the what's the word I want to use for violence? Not quite the word of me, who is so strong and so fast in his swing, but his management and his thought process was extremely conservative. And Scott and I talked about this on one of the times he came on, that I noticed that Tiger's first year or two out of school, when he played the tour, he was missing a fair amount of greens with wedges, short sided, and I think Butch got with him, and not shortly after he went on that magnificent run. But you started seeing Tiger, even on when he hit a good wedge, he was 8, 10, 12 feet. But he never, very, 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 unless his swing was off, was he short sided with a wedge. And that made total sense. It dawned on me at that time, because that was running through my head. Because back when I was playing, guys would sit there and practice their flop shots for an hour or two at a time. I'm like, what are you doing? Well, if you're going to fire at pins because you have to shoot 63 to win, you have to hit the shot. I'm thinking, but the percentages aren't in your favor. Just hit it to 10 feet if you're really on that day, or hit it to 25, 30 feet if you're not. And the worst you're going to make is bogey. If you
I had a
happen to
couple weeks
putt.
ago, I had a parent tell me they were going to work with their full swing instructor, and the parent said, I really asked you to spend some time with my son tonight on short side, up and down. And I told him, I'm like, I appreciate the idea, and it's certainly something that you could spend some time on, but you're actually working in the first. You're fighting distance. He's not going to get up and down very often.
Mm-mm.
Who it is. Let's hit a few more greens.
I mean, even Phil, with his ability in his short game, well, short sided. Now, he did hit the magnificent shots, and it got a lot of oohs and ahs, but that was when he was usually in contention, which means your timing and everything is usually pretty good. Didn't show when Phil was coming in 25th or 50th and hitting those shots and them not working out.
No, those guys are
So,
so good at getting up and down. They should. I try to tell players that all the time. It's not about getting from a goofy situation. When you're three paces off the green, you get up and down. That's when you need to get up and down. And that's what tour players do really, really well, better than everybody. I think that may be the single thing they do. That's where the largest gap, I think, is. Maybe a good amateur, really good tour players, they convert when they should. And it keeps your round going.
Yeah, Derek Dominski told me that when he was on a couple months ago, and because I told him, even to this day, I said what I struggle with is not so much the standard chips. Well, I'll kind of lump it into that phrase, but it's when I misjudge the lie, even if it looks like it's a normal or good lie. And he goes, "That's going to happen. You can't beat that. You're going to get those wrong." He said, but you have to make sure that the ones that are the stock chip shots or pitch shots, that you get those up and down way more often than you don't. And I mean, and here I am, been playing golf for almost 40 years, and I'm still learning some of the most basic, simple stuff. I can only imagine a parent who's not in the profession; they're in sales of some sort or another, and trying to piece this together. It's just very difficult. But the one question I have for you is, I'm sure you've seen this quite a bit, is, and dealing with parents, is if the mountains of data, and I'll go through a couple things. For example, don't specialize your kid too soon. So don't put them only into golf and say you need to do this if you want to play the PGA Tour. And, focus on the basics of hitting consistent shots, getting up and down from 5 steps off the green on a regular basis. Practice your 8 feet and in and your lag putting. Yet parents continue to guide their kids in the opposite direction. When you have these mountains of data, why do you think the parents just continually go to what their perception is outside of what someone like you, who's obviously an expert, or even if their coach is trying to get through them, that they just don't want to listen? They have this buried in their brain.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, I think it comes from two avenues. It is oftentimes the worst when it comes from a family that maybe didn't have previous athletic exposure or athletic exposure at a high level. So maybe not understanding that, that path, regardless of sport. Um, I think about the best college golf parents that I ever had part of programs, and they were almost always one or both parents that had this athletic exposure, whether it's college level or they were just really good, athletes and they played several sports, so they kind of got it. Um, the other thing that's really interesting, it's really, really wacky to think about it. I agree, the multi-sport thing is very important. As a coach, I always want kids, they make better teammates. Um, they're just easier to have in the locker room. Is a lot of that's coming from high school coaches, which is really interesting because you've got I don't know a college coach in any sport that I ever dealt with that didn't find a multi-sport athlete. I think that's really, really important to anybody. Even if you're a football player, you're playing some church league basketball, something. Um, so you've got college coaches that see that at value. I think most kids, right? They want to play multiple sports at some
Mm-hmm.
level. But then we've got not all, but a fair amount of high school coaches that don't want that. Um, so I think that's really short-sighted. It's really sad. Um, but I think we've been in that mode now for a long time. I mean, I know I'm 48, so that wasn't a thing when I was a kid. Um, so it's been going on for probably 15, 20 years now. And, I think parents now believe it, right? It's just what
Mm-hmm.
they know, they think. There are certain instructors that believe it. Less time off, more specialization. Um, yeah, it's really sad. And then kids start drinking that water. I mean, we have a daughter that's 13 that's um, enjoys volleyball and is a nice little player for her age. And I hear her saying she really has a hard time taking time off, and we really have to monitor that for her. So I don't know. It's really kind of worked its way into sport, really across society. It's really sad. I can tell you from the recruiting standpoint, it's funny, a colleague of mine, we always threatened that we were going to do a study on kids that were ranked top 10, top 20 junior rankings and then kind of track them. And uh, I could sit here, over the last 20 years, talk about the kids that were really good, really young, and there just aren't many of them that are on tour right now. Scotty, Ricky, Jordan, those three I remember vividly in junior golf, but Justin, they're there's a much longer list of guys that were super super highly ranked, go to college, flame out. It's usually because of burnout or just had enough pressure, didn't have anything else going on in their life. Um, I used to tell my guys, I'm like, you guys need hobbies. You need to have a hobby.
Yes.
It's fishing,
I,
video games. I don't care, but you got to have some hobby. Um,
I had Dr. Greg Half on quite some
yeah,
time ago, and he wrote, you know who he is, but for some, periodization of training with Tudor Bompa, who's the Romanian, the world-class genius in that field. And we talked about that specifically about, and for anyone that reads his book, and I can put a link to it in the summary, the kids, this, I'm not speaking to you just so the listeners know, but the kids who specialized early and had tremendous success because they were focused on one sport usually got so used to winning and let's dopamine kick, I get, for today's terminology, that by the time that other kids caught up, whether they grew faster, or at a later time, but they caught up in general just through their own training and coaching or whatever. That the kids who were exceptional as young, where they weren't winning as much anymore, they weren't having that reinforcement, and it just became boring. And I think by their mid-20s, they were out of the sport altogether. And I mean, the data is overwhelming. It's odd that to me that parents don't realize that. Maybe they're just not uh, educated on that. But even though it's out there, it's not hard to find. And TPI talks about it. People like you talk. I'm sure all the college coaches and know it. And whether they're telling it to, well, by the time they get to college, I mean, that's the time to specialize it, obviously. But maybe for some reason it's not getting through to the parents, or they don't want to listen.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah. I mean, I run into a lot of parents, freshmen in high school, right? And they think they're behind 'cause their kid is still shooting at, eighth graders. There's just no rush. Just let them develop at their own rate. And, I think there's some situations, really talented players that maybe even they did get to the highest levels, but didn't win as often or got hurt. Seems to be a little bit more prevalent on the side, but um, yeah, it's really sad.
I think the Tiger effect had a lot to do with that, but
Yeah,
I think
you're
was
correct.
misunderstood.
You're
I think
correct.
what's misunderstood is Tiger did play other sports. I don't know him. I've never talked to him. I know a number of people who are friends with him, and they said I'm pretty sure he ran track up until maybe high school and maybe early in high school. I think he played little league for some time. I don't know that for certain, but he was not one dimensional. He did a number of different things. But the public perception was that it was always focused on, his dad took him to the golf course and he did this and he practiced a lot. Okay, yes, he did that, but he also did other things. Tiger's a very well-rounded, smart, intelligent person, and you don't get that by just doing one thing all the time. So I think it was part of the Tiger phenomenon that was maybe uh, reported or pushed out there. The narrative was not quite correct, and parents just jumped on that.
Yeah.
And to Scotty's point, I think maybe I don't know his background really outside of he's from Randy Smith, and he was always around the club, but I think part of his the reason he's so good, he doesn't get frustrated or with other players coming up, or if he's leading where they're going to catch him, maybe he doesn't seem to bother him at all. He doesn't seem phased at all by the success he's had. And I just think that's, when he was a kid, you had Justin Leonard, Harrison Frazier, and all these tour pros around when he was just hanging out on the green when they're taking lessons. And, he's around these guys who he probably looked up to as his heroes when he was young and saw what they were doing. So another person is not going to phase him that much. That's just my 30,000 foot view theory on one reason he's so successful. Whether he played other sports or not, I don't know. I wouldn't have any idea. But he's a very well-rounded individual to the point that we're discussing.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't, uh, you can't replace exposure to other sports, other types of people outside of your sport, um, doing different things. There's no replacement. I think
Mm-mm.
whether it's the sport you're specializing in, whether it's just life in general, uh, it's really really important.
I guess a
Maybe
very a crude way to get it to somebody who might not be grasping it is if you have a not to relay your kid to a dog, but if you have a dog and it's a puppy and you take it out and about in society and people are petting it and it becomes very accustomed to other people. But if you keep that dog to yourself or in your house or only your family, you don't really let it out much and it doesn't associate with other dogs or other animals or other people, it's going to be extremely, extremely protective by the time it gets to adolescence and adult age, which if you want it for sheer protection, okay, maybe that's understandable. But if you want it to be, uh, we'll call it a contributing member of society or your family, then you're going to have to integrate it with other things that it's going to have to deal with on a regular basis in its life. So hopefully maybe that might shed a different
Yeah, no,
perspective.
I would agree. I mean, I talk about that with families, when being on site at junior tournaments. I think one of the biggest turnoffs for a coach at an event, a college coach, is seeing parents carrying the bag from the car to the range and standing on the range and then carrying the bag from the scoring tent back to the car when they're done and know, constantly running inside and grabbing food. You've got to let go. you know, uh, certainly when a kid's 8, I get it, that's necessary. But when you have a teenager, that is not helping that player. That player needs to figure those things out, and um, as a coach, I didn't see the parent until the first tee or uh, when the player was on the range and the parent maybe talking to other parents inside or having a drink at the bar. I always thought that was positive because that player has some distance with the family. And that is super healthy. I think it's not only healthy from sport reasons, but I think parents sometimes uh, underestimate how healthy that is just for the future of their relationship with the child. Um, I could just it becomes so clear when you coach college because the parents are around so much and you spend these 4 or 5 day trips there, and it is so apparent, the healthy relationships as far as distance created between the sport, son or daughter, and family. It just becomes so on so many levels. It's funny. I see it in volleyball with our daughter. I just it's very easy to pick up you looking at parents during competition. Um, who can kind of handle themselves without constant parent interaction. Um, it's it is such a difference maker for the success of.
Yeah, Julie Gardner, you know Julie down at Rollins. Um, she was on last week. Just came out Sunday, and I thought one of the important pieces to on the short clips that I post on social media was her speaking to that, the adversity that kids, in particular, at that point in their life, if they haven't had it up until then, and they need to face some adversity. Outside of, especially once you get to college, you often, and the bigger the program, the more they do for you, which is not preparing you for life. It's prepare. I understand what they're doing. They try to eliminate the variables so you can focus on playing well in the golf tournament and winning it and representing the school. But as far as life preparation, because once you leave that university, if you turn pro or you go in the business world, nobody's going to be holding your hand. No one's going to be doing your laundry, making sure everything's in place, and then all you have to do is perform. And Julie's point was she wants her kids on her team to face adversity because it's only going to make them stronger and better going forward. I don't have kids. I have a lot of friends who do. I have pets, and I see, maybe because I can see it more clearly, and I don't have that parental instinct to help my child as others do. So I can fault myself for that and being out of that bias. But I would have to imagine as a parent, as you said, your daughter's in volleyball, it has to be somewhat, even as much as it has to be a little bit difficult to not take that step to help her when she falls down, so to speak,
Yeah, I would
and want to
say,
help her.
I still work with a lot of college players, and when they're transitioning from high school to college, I tell the families the first semester of your freshman year as a college golfer is very, very different. Um, you're going to be qualifying on golf courses you've probably never seen before, possibly without a practice. Um, if you're not in the lineup, the majority of the interaction with the staff is going to be qualifying situations. It's pretty stressful. If you're not traveling regularly, you're not spending time half of the teams regularly, uh, and um, maybe qualifying and having to get to the golf course 10 minutes before your tee time because of class, uh, and that's part of it. I know it's not easy, but that's how it goes. That's how it goes for everybody, and you have to be able to adjust to that. And kids that have been able to deal with adversity on their own in the past handle those situations easier. Um, and it's a big difference in their transition to that level and being able to be comfortable and adjusting to different coaching styles. The coaching situation until you get to college golf is very different than college golf. Especially at the higher level, you've got coaches, men and women that are making a lot of money now. They're under a certain level of pressure, and they're involved. And they are not going to be, just bus drivers. We kind of joke about it, but that is not the role of that person. That looks very different than a high school coach, maybe an instructor back home. But players need to be ready for that, and there isn't going to be So it's a really important part of transitioning and being able to do that as a parent. You're right. We daughter's tough on herself and she has bad games and bad practices, and she's pretty good about it. She'll tell us she feels bad because let people down, but I really remind her that you got to keep pushing. This isn't going to be
Mm-hmm.
the first part.
It might have been the times, and I'm going to date myself. I was in high school in the late '80s, and our coach, who I'm still very good friends with today, when you were not playing good, and if you got demoted from the varsity to JV or JV, younger JV, you're now not playing. Uh, he didn't intervene. He watched how you handled the the challenge, and if you needed help and went to him, he would talk you through, okay, what's going on? What do you need help with? Were you having trouble? But his overall thing was, you need to play better. You need to step up and do it. However you need to figure that out, you need to do that. And I was lucky enough, when I was struggling in it, my mom and dad would tell me, okay, well, just go practice. Now, maybe that was a bit archaic, but again, that was going back 30 some years ago. So it's like, well, just go get better. Figure out what you need to do to get better, and then do that. So whether it was I had to hit the ball better, I had to putt better, chip better, but then there was, as it was playing, because we didn't have access to driving ranges much back then. They weren't prevalent everywhere, and they definitely weren't very many at the golf course or the one that our high school had. We did not have a driving range. It was, well, just pay attention more to what you're doing. Maybe don't cut a corner. Maybe play safer. Make sure that you don't hit it in the water, hit it out of bounds. So adjust your aim or wherever you need to ensure that your score was as low as possible. You might not make birdie as readily, which is basically what the decade system is. To adjust your aim, you play the percentages. So you worked yourself out of the hole that you were in, and I was very lucky that way, to come up through, I guess you'd call it a system. And then I don't think the coach set out to create a system. It was just that was his style, and it for me, I was very, looking back, I was very lucky and fortunate to have that kind of development in place as a teenage golfer.
Yeah, it's really important. I think it's really important for kids to remember too that you're not always going to get picked for the lineup, and that's part of it, and that's okay. But then that doesn't give you an excuse to work not as hard or to not take care of the little. You know, I think that if you really want to kind of drop down the ladder with a coach, you want to play poorly, and then you also want uh, not be as committed, right? A kid that's playing poorly, coach, that's fine, But if they're staying later and showing up earlier and asking for help and getting their work done at the gym and getting good grades, then that's okay. I don't mind that. I have a really good relationship with a lot of kids in the lineups, but when they're really stacking the card against them, when they're struggling on the golf course and then they're not as engaged, that's kind of making it difficult.
Well, one of the things you do is anyone can get on your website, and we'll have that link, of course, is preparing kids as they for the recruiting process as they're in high school. So let's say they've shown a lot of promise as they're middle age or middle school age, and then they're getting into high school. That recruiting process has started in today's world, which is surprising to me. I'll give a very quick story. When I was a kid, Jerome Bettis, the football player, was about 2 or 3 years older than me, and I'll never forget his signing day because it was huge in the Detroit area. I mean, it was all over. All the TV channels had it on, but it was after the football season, I think, or towards the latter part of football season of his senior year, he announced he was going to Notre Dame. Yet, as some of the students I had as long as 10 years ago, they were telling me that the recruiting process starts, you want to be signed to know where you're going by the end of your junior year, which blew me away. And I want to get into that a little bit in a minute. But the one question I had was, when you prepare some of these kids to make their, what's called a media kit, that they're going to send to coaches so they can be recognized, how do you go about that, number one? And then how do you navigate the social media dynamic, which is ever changing and extremely
Yeah,
difficult
good
or
question.
challenging?
So I would say above and beyond all things, scores drive this process. And as I said, there's plenty of programs. Everybody has their spot, but scores drive the process. So scores drive the timing of when you will commit. Scores drive the timing of schools are going to be interested and what schools are going to be interested. Timing drive the scores drive the time when you really have this kind of gets super critical to start this process. When is it too late? So it's really about engaging coaches and not so much in fanciest, glitziest, bright lights way, but just being efficient. I used to get 30 or 40 emails a day from, so you didn't have to create the longest resume or the most detailed email, but it had to be solid and it had to be well written and it had to be efficient. So we really focus on those things. Um, really, I try to be really honest. I tell parents up front, I'm going to be honest, and we will be agile to your scores, but we have to target schools that make sense, right? The process will get very frustrating very quickly if you are targeting the wrong schools. And that part of the recruiting process, as you hit on, has changed. It doesn't even look as it did 5 years ago. We were offering kids, especially when I was in South Carolina, we were offering kids when they were freshmen in high school, recruiting eighth graders. Matt Neesmith, who's on tour now, who was the number one player in the country when we had him. I think he committed the summer after his freshman year. I think I'd been watching him since grade. The portal, there were some legislation changes, kind of right around COVID, NIL. So those three things have changed everything. You can't really communicate, back and forth with the coach until June 15th, prior to your junior year. Uh, Visits have been pushed back. Official visits are not as common as they used to be. Uh, so it's done two things. If you're a kid that wants to play really high level D1 golf, men or women, um, it's really compressed that window. Yeah, kids commit later, but there's less kids committing to that demographic of school because of the portal. That has probably gone from, again, these are stereotypes, but you have to be top 350 to really have, if you really are dead set on playing D1 golf, you really have to be in that window. Um, at the same time, kids are committing later on the other end. Your mid-level D2s and D3s are going to recruit kids until spring of the senior year of the player. So because they're also being affected by the portal, but they're being affected by the portal on the back end. They have to worry about kids leaving. So not to get too long-winded about the recruiting process, but it could not be more different than 5 years ago. It's I was getting out just as it was starting to change. I don't think you'll find a coach that likes where it is right now, especially
I haven't talked to one that
everybody
likes it.
hates it. But the cart or the horse has left the bar, and I'm not sure how the NCAA puts this back together. Um, and that's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, it's very frustrating. It's not good. It's not healthy. You have a lot of coaches about ways of exiting the business, which is really sad.
I would
But
have to
yeah,
say that
recruiting's very different.
of the list of things that Nick Saban had for his reason for retiring, obviously he's been doing it for decades. That was probably way up there. Time with family, of course. But I would say somewhere on his list of 10 or 20 things that the reason he decided to step aside was the portal had a portion to do with that, or had maybe a small influence, but still had an influence. And when it reaches somebody at his level, you know that there's something significantly wrong. And I have not talked to a coach, Julie, last week that they don't like it. That there's no uh, commitment. As we talked about, when kids have some adversity, whether they don't like a coach or don't agree with the decision, they say, "Well, I'm just going to jump ship and go somewhere else." And that's not preparing them well for life, as we've been discussing. It's a yeah. The NCAA, it's like they went from 0 to 100 miles an hour, just like that. And
Yeah, I mean, 5 years ago we could buy a kid a bagel, but we couldn't buy him peanut butter. I mean, that was a legitimate rule that
that's
like our nutritional
amazing.
staff had to deal with. That was a rule that we used to joke about in compliance. And but now you can just go wherever, whenever, however, for undisclosed amount of money and there's recruiting going on via social media. The portal at D1 level has become a joke, even in golf. Even in golf, I mean, uh, kids are committed to other schools long before they enter the portal um, via social media in all sports. Um, it's really sad because it's an awesome profession. I loved it. But that I'd still be doing it if it wasn't for the pandemic, and I would encourage anybody that wants to do it to get into it. There's more money being poured into college golf than there ever has. You can make a really good living, at some levels. At the same time, there's a lot of people trying to figure out, okay, if I get out, what am I going to do? A lot of people are afraid to get out because they don't know what they're going to do, and that was me. I was scared to death. Um, but it speaks, on a lower level of what you were talking about with Saban. It's the coaching profession is not in a good spot right now, and I don't know if the
No.
NCAA that they know it, they don't care. Um, it's really, really sad.
What was there was the reason to do that? I mean, if you look back when we were younger, young kids, and the SMU got the death penalty, for their continued violations, and they had the inquiry and the case and everything. So there were ramifications for doing things you weren't supposed to. If I would say that it probably went on longer than it should have, and they finally had got to a point they said we got to do something about this. But it it didn't seem to me like they needed to make this drastic change that they did. Now, I would not agree that. And the one thing I talked about on the last show was when Tiger Woods went to lunch, I think, with Arnold Palmer. Mr. Palmer, it might have been at Bay Hill, and he was still at Stanford, and there was a big question who paid for the lunch, because if Tiger didn't pay for it, now he could be under NCAA violation. I thought that was ridiculous, that a kid can't go to lunch with anybody, in particular an icon of the game, because they think it's going to influence him on what he does going forward. Thought that was ridiculous. It just doesn't seem. It seems like the NCAA gets very. I'm going to say this, not disrespectfully, but lazy, in that they're like, okay, we have an issue, we need to solve it. Let's just broad stroke it for the entire NCAA, Division One, all the way down to Division Three, even NAIA, and that should fix the problem. When it doesn't do anything of the sort, it's like they're all different, have different challenges to them, and what you're doing isn't solving the problem. It's just going the complete opposite, or at least what it seems like they've done.
Yeah, I think they had created such an immense, complex web of rules. I mean, the rule book that we used to have to study was several hundred pages long. Um, I think they got to the point where they realized we can't control this, and kind of just threw their hands up in the air. And so we're just going to deregulate a lot of different stuff. Um, and I think that's kind of where we're at. And again, my opinion, I of course don't know what's going on inside the offices at the end. I'm not sure if they know what to do next. I saw something come across last week that transferring is actually easier. Not sure if that was just football and basketball, because they often have different rules. But um, yeah, I don't know. It's in a bad spot. It's in a really bad spot. We were getting word that kind of coming. I mean, I know, there's going to be a union that's going to happen with athletes. And they're going to probably have a salary from these bigger schools. Um, I know from some people that I talked to, there's really, really big athletic departments that generate immense amounts of revenue that we watch play football, and they're probably going to have to cut sports, which was unimaginable 5 years ago, because they're going to have to hire a lot more staff. They essentially have 500 to 800 employees now. At the same time, you know, if we move back 5 years, 6 years, saying that a school that brings in 150 million in revenue, and the kids shouldn't get any of that, especially the kids that are having the jersey sold the book,
Mm-hmm.
saying those kids shouldn't get any of that. I also don't agree with that. That's my also
Me
personal.
neither. If you're going to use a kid's likeness to make money, that I don't think. Julie, not to keep using her reference, but she even said she was in agreement in Julie's old school that if you're going to use that kid's likeness, they need to get something. Yes,
Yeah,
they're getting an education, but you can't take advantage of
no,
somebody who's doing some good and promoting your
no,
entity.
no, and there are golfers getting paid. I mean, I know NIL's a thing. When kids are being recruited, they're asking for it. They're asking for it in the portal. Just moving it to kind of local. Should Spencer Rattler get paid when he's at South Carolina? He absolutely should because he moves the needle. Um, should the sixth person on the men's or women's golf team get paid? My opinion, I don't think so. Um, there are ways that they can generate their own revenue, and a lot of kids are doing that by forming their own relationships with companies, um, doing stuff on social media, and that's fine. But the problem is that I don't know how you come back from this because, as we saw with the old band case, I don't think the NCAA can win a court case if they go back on these things. If you say these kids can't get paid, um, in a very general sense, I don't think they can win any of those cases, which I don't necessarily disagree with. I don't think they probably should win. I think the
Mm-hmm.
kids probably should win such a case. Um, we just can't seem to find the gray area, right? It's really what we don't like. We don't like gray area, but now we have none. Um, and it's really I think it's really gonna hurt sports like golf, where there's been a ton of money poured into it. You can make a fair amount of money coaching golf at certain levels. It's on TV. The exposure is unbelievable. Um, but I don't know how much longer that's going to be like that because listen, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, those sports move the needle. And I know, like today, it's really big programs. That's where the revenue, that's where the money is being shifted. That's where the resources are being shifted all the way from social media to fundraising to NIL. And if that money is being shifted to those sports, more of it, it's gonna come away from somebody else, um, and it's gonna come away from sports.
Yeah, usually any type of government regulation or overregulation, the market will react and it will insulate some who are already established, which it seems to be doing. It's going to be another case proven. And it will, as you say, it will eliminate some of the smaller sports, which will likely enhance some of those institutions that are good at those other sports or have established a strong foundation where they have committed to it. Uh, the golf, for example, or tennis program, or a smaller, less money-making sport. But the smaller institutions, because they don't have football programs or their football programs are they're not very good. Um, those schools will grow and they're in kind of on the ground level, and they will appreciate to use as a commodity. And then it's going to be harder for any entry level people to get in, or entry level universities to get in. So it's just going to make it, as they say, it's to protect the students or the entity, NCAA or the institutions. It's only going to make it more difficult for more people to enter, which, as we all know, competition, particularly in golf, we know that since it's individual, although we're talking college and it's a team sport, more competition, the more it fuels people to improve and adapt and make changes and get better. And it's going to do the exact opposite. Uh, that's my generic perspective as far as just studying economics for so many years, but hearing it from yourself, who's someone who's been on the inside and understands here's the intricacies of what this is, and the policies that NCAA is passing is only exacerbating the problem. It's like maybe just leave it alone for a little bit. We know there's a problem, but maybe leave it alone. Make small tweaks and adjustments that, and I don't even know what those would be. Maybe I'm just speaking. Someone's going to say you're nuts. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, but in general, maybe make small tweaks and adjustments until you can see how this plays out over a longer period of time, where you can say, okay, here's the problem we have. Here's the thing that will fix it. We'll keep everything else the same or somewhat similar. Kids can still make some money. Um, the big ones can make a little more, but we're not going to overhaul the whole system. We're not going to do 180 and completely screw it up the other way. We're going to modify it as needed as we go forward. I think that would be the common sense approach, but
Yeah, and
we don't seem to be common sense driven.
I don't think they realize the damage they're doing to the schools in general because what's happening now is so you've got donors, right? It's the same pot of donors, really. They're giving to just general funds for athletics, right? Or they're giving to support the men's golf program. Well, they're also now being asked to support NIL. Okay. Well, guess what? The schools are also targeting those individuals to build the new science building or to build the new performing arts building, right?
They're going to run
Now
that well
that
dry.
that that was going on before NIL. right? Funding athletics in general is going on before NIL, right? Especially at your lower level schools where there's not a ton of revenue generated. So what's happening now, um, the folks that are charged with building buildings, building the new library, those donors are being pulled in one more direction. If you're trying to build the new football stadium on campus, maybe the family that you used to go to for a large donation, well, they've decided they're going to give to NIL now, right? Some donors don't want to give to NIL. They're into building. They're into things that can touch and feel. Um, it's ugly. It's ugly.
It's a spider's web of, oh shit. One thing I've got to ask you, because I'm very curious to know this, is, and I think it's something that you have an expertise in, and that is identifying uh, universities or schools that would fit what a student is good at. So as they're going from high school to college, making sure that they're going to a program that will benefit the program and will benefit the individual that they can thrive in, or at least have a very good chance to thrive in. How do you go about that? Identifying what culture that team has or that university has, and how it fits with the student on a personal or individual level.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to scores, right? Scores drive that initial, okay, where do I fit? And then when we start going, okay, well, these places kind of fit from a score standpoint. Yeah, maybe we're on the fence. Maybe this is a place we can definitely play at, or somewhere in there. I think, and we're splitting golf from academics right now. Being in the lineup is such a game changer, or being in the mix to be in the lineup. If you're the 8, 9, 10 person on the lineup, I know a lot of people think, it'd be really fun to go to a big school and be on the roster. Um, Being 8, 9, 10 is not a fun place to live. As I hit on a little bit, earlier, your relationships with teammates is very different. You don't spend time with half of the team most of the time. You're not spending a lot of quality time with coaches, because when you do, it's in a qualifying situation. It's really stressful. Um, Oftentimes, there's 3 or 4 kids at home that aren't traveling. 1 or 2 of those kids is probably not going to be super motivated. They may check out. So then if you're a motivated kid and you're the 9th kid on the team, it becomes harder to stay motivated. I think when you don't have kids around you that are motivated, I think that's a huge issue. So going somewhere where you can compete right away is immensely important. Geography, really, really important part of this process too. Some people, um, don't mind being in cold weather. Certain parts of the country want to stay south. Um, it's also a D1 school in cold weather looks a lot different than a D1 school in the south. A
Mm-hmm.
D3 in Connecticut is going to probably look very different than a D3 in Florida as far as the level. Um, you may have a family that says, I want to play D1 golf. Like they're just stuck on that. So you say, okay, well, maybe we're not at the level where we can play D1 golf in warm weather, but maybe we can play D1 golf in the northern climate where maybe the level isn't as high. And the player may come back, yeah, I don't want to go where it's cold. Okay, well, then we need to probably focus on D3. So yeah, it's just trying to, I don't think there's many kids that check all of their boxes. Probably 30, 40 kids that get to do that. There's just not that end up at the exact perfect place. So you're trying to check as many boxes as you can, while also trying to make sure that they have a chance to compete. While also, usually the families have kind of their agenda too of what they want academically. How exact is your program does the player want to be in? To throw something out there that I was in a discussion with one time when I was at Wisconsin. We were talking to folks. The business school at Wisconsin was really difficult to get into, and we would often get kids who couldn't get in, and they had really high GPA as sophomores. And we were told, a bunch of us, that unless you have a very, very specific post-college job that you want for a lot of work, oftentimes the undergraduate degree becomes less important if you know you're going to go get your master's or your PhD, right? Um, so I think a lot of families get stuck on, I've got to go to this place, get this degree. And one of the conversations that we talk about is, well, do you intend on getting your master's? Do you intend on getting your PhD? Because sometimes that undergraduate degree, um, unimportant is not the right word, but you know, you can get a really good degree via networking, internships, and maybe going to get your MBA. You know, when you're 30 and have a good job, is anybody going to really remember that undergraduate degree? You know, unless you're going to, an Ivy League school or some of the top academic schools. So yeah, lots of talking points, lots of different angles. Every family is different. There is no silver bullet, right? Everybody's
Mm-hmm.
process is different. Um, but at the end of the day, scores drive the process starting point.
So it seems like it's more of a sliding ruler with a bunch of
Mhm.
variables. It's like, okay, are you, what do you want to be competitive and play, or be on the travel team when you get there based off the skill level you're at now, and still have it challenging? Uh, I would have to imagine that at some point you have to leave the kid and the parent to discuss which one's going to be first. They're playing or their academics. You know, one's going to be one, one's going to be two, or 1A and 1B. I'm sure that the kids are always going to be, every kid that can play in college, I think, has the dream of playing professionally once they get out. And I would say if you ask 100 kids, 99 are going to say, I want to go to where I'm going to play, and academics will be second. I'll focus, but they're still going to be secondary to my development. And then, as you said, there is a difference between the Division I school in the north versus in the south. I mean, you get in the south, you get the powerhouses. You get in like Oklahoma and Texas, and then you get out to California. That's a very different animal than the Midwest or the Northeast, and it's just they get to play more. Obviously, there is a difference between hitting balls in a net all winter and being able to get outside and play. I mean, you can't argue that point. There's a reason that they are able to recruit, and you would know better than anybody. You were at USC for many years, and then you went to Minnesota. And even though Minnesota, you guys did very well, I would have to say if you took your best teams at each, or your mid-range, or your worst teams at each, and pitted them against each other, I think that USC would. I would bet money that they would come out the overwhelming majority of the time as the victor.
Yeah, it's just a very different way of doing things. Um, I was at a school in Wisconsin where we had a great budget. That wasn't an issue. We had an enormous travel budget, so we didn't really play any less golf than the kids did when I was in South Carolina. It just looked different. We were flying places Friday night, get a couple rounds in Dallas, Orlando, and then flying home on Sunday night. Um, so the golf really wasn't any less. It just looked very different. But yeah, it's just a different, you're surrounded, certain parts of the country, you're just surrounded by 30, 40 schools within a 3-hour radius. Everybody's good. D1, D3, right? Then go north, it's just not as exacting. You do have good programs, you have good players. There's not as many of them. But people that say you can't be good in cold climates, I could not disagree with that more. I mean, Illinois has been awesome for the last 20 years. Carnegie Mellon won the D3 national championship last year in Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
And if you're winning a national championship D3 level, you probably have two, three, four kids that could play D1 golf. I mean, they're legit. So they did that coming from Pittsburgh. So um, there's good golf everywhere. I think if you're going to go to a small school in a colder climate, are you going to have the ability to travel as much as far as the budget? Probably not. You probably aren't. So if that's a concern, then that's a valid concern. Uh, but at the same time, if you want to get in a lineup, you want to play, it becomes a little harder too in your climate. So lots of things to think about. That geography, huge player.
How when you were at USC, the in-state rivalry of competition for golfers, because I mean, South Carolina is a hotbed for junior golf. So you got, you're competing against Clemson, you're competing against Furman, a slew of other schools, and USC Aiken. Um, you've got Georgia a few hours away, UGA. I'm sure the there was borders of recruiting, Florida and Florida State, that all those things would get crossed, and it had to be extremely um, intense, I would say, at sometimes. and everybody, as scores, as you mentioned, is usually the number one criteria, at least of where you start when you're recruiting somebody. But when you're going up against schools who are also very, very good in the same conference, and you're all seem to be within a 6 hour radius, we'll call it. Now, I know Florida's in Gainesville, it's a little further away. Let's call it a 6 hour radius of all these great schools. What is it, or what do you identify with a student or an athlete that you would say to them to to get them to come to USC? Would it get down more to what that person's looking for, and then what your guys' program offers, or is it something else?
Yeah, so that's an awesome question, and it's really an interesting situation, specific to South Carolina, because Clemson and South Carolina are the big programs in state. They obviously are going to get their share of players, and South Carolina get their share of players. There's enough players to go, and this is pre-portal, so how it looks now is significantly different. Um, and then after that, this is just how we did it. I don't know specifically how Clemson, but we had some connections to Georgia, so we always have kids on the team from Georgia. We looked at it like UGA is going to get however many they want, and that's fine. They do a good job. Georgia Tech recruits more nationally, so we felt like we had a little bit of a window there where we could get a kid that maybe UGA is on the fence with, not going to go to Georgia Tech, and we had a lot of success with those kids. And Bill still doing that and does quite well. North Carolina was a little bit more difficult because there's so many schools up there, so many big programs. So we spent a little bit of time up there, not a ton. We recruited Tennessee really hard.
Mm.
Tennessee at the time was very similar to Georgia. Tennessee was a little down. This is pre-Brendan coming. Vanderbilt was a little down, and yeah, that's a different type of student. At the time, then Chattanooga was very good. They were number one in the country actually for a while. Blaine's doing a good job getting. But so we recruited Tennessee. Florida, we had to have a connection because of same kind of like North Carolina option. Um, so we've really probably less than 6 hours. We probably had a circle from Charleston to Birmingham to Knoxville. That was kind of where we did most of our recruiting. You know, now it's very different. I mean, the portal. If let's just take Clemson, South Carolina, two major programs in the state. So if you look at a 4-year window, let's just say 2008, those two programs, we each would have brought in probably 12 high school kids in a 4-year window. So that's 24 kids. The majority of those kids would have been in state, uh, 12 each. Now those schools are going to bring in 6 high school kids in a 4-year window.
Wow.
So it's really changed in-state recruiting for every school in every state, right? It's just not here. Uh, it's wildly different at that level, which kind of stinks for it.
When you're in your recruiting process, do you look at the potential that you can make something to build around that the people on the team kind of have a beacon or a rallying cry for? Like if all the kids are from South Carolina or very close, most of them are, and maybe one's from just over the border. So let's say they're in North Augusta or in Augusta and they're coming to play at USC, or they're close enough. They're right across the border. Does that play any part where you're looking at building this culture? And I guess the polarizing example of that would be, watching the 30 for 30 when the University of Miami started recruiting all these kids who were maybe had a little bit of a troubled background, that they weren't going to an Alabama or a Michigan or Notre Dame. And the University of Miami said, hey, these are good kids that maybe they just got a bad draw, but we'll bring them here. And all those kids developed like this chip on their shoulder that they want to prove everybody wrong. Not that I'm saying that golf would have a chip on their shoulder, but is there something that in the recruiting process where you look to develop that type of culture where you can build upon that? Or is it
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a mix of finding kids that have an allegiance to a state school, that's all they wanted. That's all they've ever wanted is play for that particular school, whether it's South Carolina or Wisconsin. And then specifically here in South Carolina, we um, we always had a kid or two that Clemson didn't recruit or Georgia didn't recruit, and they were, um, that frustrated them, wanted to come show them what they could do. I think that happens everywhere, not specific to here. Um, but yeah, I think, it's really important to build culture around the program and kids that really take pride in being part of a program at a big state school, and then that has lasting effects after they graduate and they're involved in engagement in the program. Uh, I know that's a huge concern right now for coaches with portal and it's a big concern I've heard for development folks is the portal and what it's going to do to development and giving because you're going to have kids that have gone to two or three schools and if they spend 1 year at a school how is that going to change development? How's that change? How's that giving? When that athlete is 50 years old and then has had a very successful business career, where are they going to give? Is
Mm.
there that tug at the heart to give to that school because they spent 1 or 2 years there, and maybe they went to three schools? Um, Again, is that something the NCAA is about? Who knows? Probably not. But
Doubt it.
yeah, doubt it. uh, so there's less of that. I mean, when I was at Wisconsin, there was a lot of pride and talk about, having Wisconsin kids or having kids that come in from out of state that really bought into the culture of Madison. And it was a legit thing. It was a thing. Like being a Badger, big deal. Um, and I don't think that's not as high of a priority anymore because it can't be, with the portal. That kind of stinks. Uh,
Well,
that's
where
part
I
of it.
came up with that question, I mean, obviously Mark Silvers, who's from Savannah, and you guys, and it again, it's a city right across the state line. It's that you guys pulled him out of Georgia and got him up to SC, and I mean, he speaks so fondly of his time there, and uh, had a great time and relished it. Obviously, very successful, and all those things seem to go hand in hand. You like where you are, you enjoy the people around you, and it just seems to fuel success. And at that time, you guys had a tremendous amount of success, as did he. Um, and I think it was you that gave him one thing that really spurred him on when he went to play pro. And I can't remember what it was. He told me one time it was so simple, and he goes, "How the hell did I not realize that before?" But then he just went on this tremendous run. Um, but that's kind of where I got that question: is how do you recruit from other states and get these kids to buy in? But it makes total sense. If a kid was never a huge fan of their in-state school, then you can pull from not too far across the state line from it, and develop a great culture, which
Yeah,
you seem to have a blueprint to do, almost a
Silvers is a
trademark.
perfect question's awesome. It leads right into Silvers. I mean, so Mark, he would tell you this. Well, didn't have an outstanding career. Was always really talented. Um, but he was actually recruited, and I think he was offered by Tulane, and then the hurricane took place. So Mark was kind of out of a spot. Uh, Tom Shaw, coach Tulane, who now is at Abilene Christian. Um, and Mark was a really smart kid, really strong academic. And so that's how we ended up with Mark. And I think he played a little bit his freshman year, but same thing. He wasn't really like a Bulldog fan. He was in Savannah. He was really good friends with Brian Harmon growing up, neighboring school. So, um, Mark just didn't have the career as a junior that Brian did. But Mark was super motivated to come to Carolina and to kind of work hard. The kid worked so hard, um, and to prove what he could do. And he just got better every year. Spent a lot of time with Bill, and um, Mark got better mentally, physically, got stronger, um, and he ended up being an All-American. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And then, shoot, played at the highest level you can play at.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and perfect example, right? Just wasn't a Bulldog fan, wasn't really recruited by them, um, and ended up coming to our place and huge
You know
part.
what's funny about he and a lot of I don't know how much Brian played, but over at OC Welch owns that golf course. It's the old one. That's also a Donald Ross. I think Savannah has like 4 Donald Ross courses. The
Mhm.
golf club, the base, one of the island courses. It used to be the old Sheridan Inn course, and then there's the public one, uh, Bacon Park.
Yeah, yeah.
And you had Tim O'Neill, Tommy Schaff, Silvers, who's a few years younger. I think Brian played there, and Mark said a few handful of other kids that played there. But all those kids went on to do some very, very impressive things with their golf games, all out of this little Muni golf course in Savannah. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool story. They should maybe do a 30 for 30 on that, on why it is so important, regardless of the shape of the course or how well it's kept or maintained. It doesn't have to be a Augusta National or Pine Valley private club. It can be this Muni. Just the camaraderie, I think, with those guys is still very tight, that they all grew up at this little course, like a, maybe it's a bad way to say it, but it's kind of a funny way, that like a Bad News Bears of golf. They're all coming from this Muni, and then they did some very good things. Obviously, Tim kept at it, and he's still doing some really good things.
Access. It's all about access, right? We know that. I always cringe when I hear these private clubs that have these long list of rules for juniors they can't get on the golf course. I was fortunate to grow up at a place in Pennsylvania where we played in the game Saturday mornings. And I'm not the most successful player to come out of this club. Furyk grew up there, and Chase Duncan is a really outstanding instructor. Bunch of college players. And we had access. We could play whenever we wanted to play with whoever we wanted to play. And I'm sure that's the situation Mark and Brian were in. And I wish more clubs would recognize how much good they can do by being more agile with when they let kids play.
Mm-hmm. Anything we missed? I mean, we touched on a lot.
I don't think
we
so.
left
We've
anything
talked
out.
about a lot of stuff. I mean, we figured out how we're going to reform the NCAA.
If only they would listen to us.
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to listen to this. This is probably going to be in the board meeting tomorrow morning.
But I hope it helps at least open some eyes for parents who don't know. Again, the parents who are they're golfers, they're in golf. I'm sure they've reached out to you, but at least introduce you to some of the parents who are unfamiliar. They don't know what to do, and they want to do right by their kids and help them the best they can. Hopefully, they will reach out to you from this. At least take that first step with an inquiry to what they can do best to help their child, either whether it's whatever division they're going to play at, but at least place them in the right spot so their kid can enjoy that college experience and not do as many do and just start jumping all around because they're not happy.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. And I think what I try to impress upon people is there's so much opportunity to play college golf. When you combine men's and women's, there's like 1,600 programs. So let's just say there's 16,000 players, and you can play college golf if you shoot 90. Um,
Mhm.
so just getting people to kind of see that, we watch these same 60 schools play football and basketball on TV every weekend, right? And that's only 60 schools, right? There are 700 plus schools that have golf after that. And that's where
Wow.
most kids are going to end up. And that's okay. There's nothing. And you can play on the OPJ or the PJ Tour if you come from those other 700 plus too. The tour doesn't care. Um, so yeah, opportunity is just so important to remember, and it's everywhere.
Yes, I think it's important that people remember, don't just focus on the prodigies, the Tigers, the Phils, the Jordans, the Scotties, JTs. I mean, those kids they were around it their whole life from the time they were very small. They are, the top of the food chain, but there's, uh, I always use Dustin Johnson's example. I know it might be a bad one, but I mean, he played at Coastal Carolina, and I mean, Coastal Carolina that I knew wasn't. I mean, they had the golf program, so they're obviously a very good golf school. But if you're a very good athlete, junior golfer, Coastal Carolina is not on a lot of their radars. And here he comes out of there, and obviously he's done some amazing things in the game and had a tremendous career. So to your point, you don't have to play at a Power Five golf school to make the PGA. At least not anymore.
No, no, the tour doesn't care.
Nope.
Your chances are not increased if you go to one of those big programs. And there's plenty of men and ladies out there doing it that have come from smaller programs that are having great careers.
You got a few minutes more. We'll do emergency 9, just a fun wrap up.
Let's do it.
All right. First and last questions have been the same for everybody for all 142 episodes, and
Yeah.
everything else in between kind of changes. So, The first one is I always say the Ryder Cup, but we'll say if you're playing it over at Chichesi and the member guest and they're going to crank some music, Seth and the boys are going to crank some music as you walk up to the first hole. What song are you going to have them play?
Terrapin Station from the Grateful Dead.
That didn't take very long. Let me write that down. All right. The Dead. Hollywood has been following your career unknown to you. And they call you up and they say, Michael, we want to do a movie about your career, and we're going to let you pick the actor that plays you. Who are you going to have them cast?
I mean, as a coach, who else would you want other than Jason Sudeikis from Ted Lasso? There is nobody else, right?
No, that's a given. That's a very good one. I have not had that obvious of an answer so far. Most of them are Matt Damon or Brad Pitt, of course. Like some of the people say my wife would say Brad Pitt, but have not had that answer yet.
If we could all be as funny and as inspiring as Ted Lasso, I think we'd all be good for it.
The best purchase in the last year that you've bought under $1,000 can be anything. Can be $10, can be $900, anything under 1,000 that has really been a great purchase.
That's a good question. Boy, I know this sounds corny, but I would say I am getting to go on a lot of trips with my wife and daughter to see her play volleyball. We just got back late last night, so and that is something I never would have been able to experience as a coach. So anytime that I can travel, we watch our daughter play volleyball, I'll take it.
Yeah, that's not corny at all. That's a very, very good one. The most used app on your phone?
Probably the Tidal app here in Charleston. See, and the beach is good, or it's a good time to throw the line in the water.
There you go. Spoken like a true South Carolinian. Got to go fishing.
That's right.
If you could stick any restaurant, chain or otherwise, in your kitchen, who are you going to put in there?
It's pretty.
Could be a restaurant chain or a fast food chain. Any restaurant, any food entity business that you want.
Well, anybody that played for me will appreciate this. I'm a big fan of Jersey Mike travel. We used to hammer Jersey.
Jersey Mike's, that's a hard one to argue as well.
Yeah, solid every time.
If you could sit in a golf cart for a few hours and talk to anybody in history that you wanted to pick their brain, have a conversation, who would it be?
Doc Rotella. Super fortunate. When I was in South Carolina, he used to come spend some time with our team every year for a weekend in January. And so I've spent a lot of hours with him, listening to him. But it's funny, every year I learn something new, and I don't know, what his message really resonates with me, and just is so insightful.
Yeah, very keeps things very simple.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone I heard him talk here in Hilton Head many years ago. What was her name? She was a part owner. She played the tour. She was one of his students. She was part owner of a golf shop here that was open, a retail shop. And they were doing a big promo, and she asked him to come in and speak. And he said, not a problem. And he said, look, for the local PGA, beforehand, I'll do an hour presentation to them, no charge. And for me, it was embarrassing. 6 people showed up we've got 47 golf courses in Southern Beaufort County, and 6 pros show up to see Dr. Bob. That was, I wanted to cringe.
Yeah.
Now, he went ahead and it was great, but everyone I've ever talked to that's worked with him, or you listen to him on the interviews, and they always, after he gives them what they need, it's like, it's that simple, it's that easy. It's like, well, yeah, you've been making it too hard.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Who would be the 4 on your coaching Mount Rushmore?
Any sport?
Any sport.
That's a good one. Joe Torre. My dad and I are Yankee fans. I think the world of Mike McGraw and what he's done. He was always very nice to me. Just a good human being. He's obviously very successful. And more of a personal, because of what he did for me. Bill McDonald, who I worked for at South Carolina, he really changed my professional life, and still one of my best friends today.
Who is it? So, Torrey, McGraw,
Mike McGraw and
McDonald.
Bill McDonald.
Who is the fourth?
Oh, fourth. Got to come up with another one. Um, hmm. I was born in Kansas, so diehard Kansas Jayhawks fan. So probably would have to say Fall Gallen.
Okay. Makes sense. The college allegiance.
Yeah.
Speaking of, we were talking about culture. Here. Now, this is an odd, interesting. It's somewhat of a new one. Are you a shower in the morning or a shower in the evening person?
Both.
You're definitely going to be clean. That's for
Got to
sure.
wake up and have pretty bad allergies, so have to get that
That makes
stuff
total
off.
sense. So,
Yep.
we just coming somewhat out of allergy season in our area. So
Yep.
last 6 to 8 weeks has not been fun for
No,
South Carolinians.
brutal.
And then the last one, in your opinion, as far as golfers are concerned, who's the GOAT?
Tiger. I know that's a little bit of a LeBron MJ. That it's an endless argument. But
It is an endless argument. I
what
think
he did, the players that were around him, golf courses were harder than they were, I think, 20, 30 years before that when Jack. I don't know. It's hard to. I mean, he did it at the same time too when there was a guy who also won 50 tournaments. So, I don't know, without knowing the numbers, I don't know if Jack had somebody that was a colleague of him that was winning that much well. I know he had some great players, but I don't know if anybody won 50 times Jack was winning. Tiger. I don't. I think
Tiger, as I've had, you're coming up 150 episodes. Tiger is in the lead. I would say probably a good 65 to 35%. It's hard to argue. It almost somewhat goes generational. So anyone over 55 to 60 and above has said Jack, of course, and anyone under has leaned heavily towards Tiger. And it's an argument that can be. I could probably do a whole episode. On that. Maybe if Brando Chambly ever comes on, he and I can discuss. I found when he had his podcast with Jamie Diaz, they had a very interesting discussion on that. And I tend to agree on that topic with Brando, probably a little more than most. I'm sure, there's various things you can agree or disagree with Brando on. But
good conversation.
Yes, maybe at some point he'll come on and we'll talk about that. Michael, this has been a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed it. And I hope a lot of people, again, we'll have all Michael's Under Par Consulting links, social media, website, everything. If you have a junior, please reach out to him. He obviously knows exactly what he's doing and can tremendously help. Michael, is there anything else you want to add?
No, this was a joy. I just enjoy. We had some great topics. It's just fun to talk golf. Really, really, truly enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, cool. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll check you out next time.